Welcome back to On Work and Revolution, where we talk about what's shaking up in the world of work. I'm your host, Debbie Goodman. I'm CEO of Jackhammer Global, a global group of executive search and leadership coaching companies. And for those of you who don't know Jackhammer, we're Africa's largest executive search boutique. We find leaders for organizations in about 24 countries on the continent. I also coach CEOs all over the world. And on any given day, I am speaking to leaders on about 4 different continents. My mission with all of my work is to help leaders and companies to create amazing workplaces so that everyone can have a really happy, healthy work life. And I mean, you can call me an idealist, but that's really my thing. Okay, today I am joined by my colleague and returning guest, Advaita Naidoo, MD of Jackhammer Africa, who is my co-conspirator and passionate advocate for reshaping workplace norms. Hi, Advaita.
Hello, Debbie. I think today I'm going to be called your co-idealist.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
do it.
I
All
was
right, so today's, yes?
I was going to say I think we've missed a trick by not doing this recording from the beach. But then again, maybe that will give the idea that we're always on wherever we are, and which is a bit contrary to the message we want to land here.
Okay. Plus, in Cape Town, I don't think it's beach weather, right?
Fair. Okay.
Okay, I'm in Manhattan Beach. It is completely overcast and cloudy, so no beach today.
Okay.
All right, so today's episode is called Take the Effing Break. And as you know, I love cursing, but I'm trying to be a little bit polite with this. The title is deliberate because we're talking about leave and why it's actually such a fraught issue. And in my view, why leave is actually a cultural issue. It's not an admin or policy one. So regardless of what is written on paper, regardless of the policies, whether or not people actually take their leave, how they take it, how they feel about it, in my view, that's all about culture. I mean, what's your take?
Agreed. I think in a lot of organizations and for a lot of people, leave becomes a grudge for the people taking it. It becomes a grudge for their families if, when you're having time out, you're constantly checking in on your emails and not really letting go of the office. So it has become hypersensitive in personal lives and work lives. So I'm really excited to unpack the cultural issues.
Okay, so whether or not people actually take their leave and then how they feel about it when they're actually on leave, I think is primarily dependent really on their manager and their peers, and whether people are actually supported when they unplug. Are you made to feel guilty for the fact that you're taking leave while everybody else is working? And is this considered like some extra special benefit or perk
Yeah.
versus a really important part of how you stay healthy and productive and engaged at work?
Exactly. And I think another question to ask there is, do your colleagues begrudge you your time out? Do they resent needing to pick up the slack for you a little bit when you are taking your time out? And that really goes back again to the cultural issue. So it's your line manager. Do they turn it into a chore in the office? And your colleagues, when they say goodbye to you, what's their attitude really?
Right. Okay. I want to dig straight into this relatively new-ish idea of unlimited leave, which sounds extremely progressive. It's something that I think arose in the tech world, perhaps in the US, may have been prominent elsewhere, but I think primarily considered to be a benefit that was offered to people who, particularly in startup culture or in organizations where they were really trying to make it sound attractive to join an organization, they say, you know something, you can take unlimited time off.
Because
But actually, it
they
sounds progressive, but it results in people taking less time off.
It does. And I also just want to call out the genesis of it. Yes, it is sold as an employee value proposition for a lot of companies that maybe would not have been able to offer big salaries or other things that larger companies could have offered. But there's also something about a company's benefit here of not having unused leave as a balance sheet liability. So yes, it sounds very progressive, but there are certain instances where it is really for the company's benefit. And again, is it a perk in practice? Are people actually taking their leave? Because if it's another noose around someone's corporate neck, it really may as well not exist.
Ah, you cynic.
Uh, I thought I was the co-idealist today, but I am just calling out inconsistencies.
Okay, 100%. And I agree with you. By the way, there's this stat that studies actually show that in companies with unlimited leave, employees apparently take fewer days than with traditional policies, where it's like you get
See,
2 weeks or whatever it is.
what did I say? Right?
Okay. All right. So, in theory, at Jack Hammer, we also have an unlimited leave policy. And so I want to check in with ourselves
Mm.
whether we are walking the talk. So, yes, we have, when somebody signs a contract of employment with Jack Hammer, there are formal days leave. You get X number of days.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what they are. And I can't remember what they are because I don't monitor them.
Sure.
And the deal is that you take leave when you want, as long as your deliverables are met.
Well,
And
yes,
so, yeah.
yes. However, we have had to get a little bit more structured to make sure that delivery is still seamless for everyone concerned. So, yes, you take leave, but if you want to take a longer block of leave, there are a few more steps that you need to clear, but they're not onerous. So, you do need to give sufficient notice. You do need to make sure that there is good handover. So, I don't want anyone to think that it's, oh, this really airy fairy, laissez faire kind of thing that works because we're a smaller environment. That's not it at all. We have been very deliberate and very intentional about how we've put this policy together so that it actually works and that people feel comfortable to take the leave rather than just having it as a pie in the sky thing that they maybe will do in 3 years' time.
Okay, well, thanks for talking about the fact that there is some clear structure around that. I guess you're the one who handles that versus me. So
Sure.
thank you for that too. I just want to talk about like where, so I, many years ago, first of all, I used to be a classified workaholic until I had my kids. And then I was forced to be a little bit more balanced in how I worked. But I also started to realize that I was going through these periodic cycles of working so intensely and then falling down. Fortunately, pretty robust. I could take literally a long weekend and revive myself. And
Superwoman.
no, that's not a badge of honor at all.
Yeah.
I was actually it was very unhealthy actually. But I started to realize that I'd have actually take a long weekend and come back feeling fired up, inspired. I'd usually have had some great ideas, some little bit of inspiration while I'd had time off and then ready to go the next 100 yards. And thought to myself, I really need to make sure that we have this idea around a long weekend break. Well, I thought that was going to be a good idea. Every quarter, I said, every quarter, everybody needs to take a long weekend off, organize it, preferably not all at the same time. And we sort of implemented it, but I think not very well at the beginning because I realized after a while people weren't actually taking their long weekends.
So I agree. I think it was, again, one of those ideas that was nice in practice. But to come back to the point about it being a cultural issue, it is now very much more entrenched to the point that we don't have to monitor whether people are taking their long weekend breaks because everybody is self managed. Their deliverables are met. And so we know that in addition to the unlimited leave and the safety rails around that, people are taking off the sporadic days that they need. They are taking their long weekend break. They're taking mental health breaks when they need to. They're letting us know that they're checking out for the next day or so because they need to regroup. They need to take a break. And so that's when you know that the system is working, when people feel comfortable enough to mention it.
Yeah, I do notice because I just see an email coming in from somebody from the team to say, hey, I'm taking tomorrow off. And I have no idea whether they kind of requested it or they're just at the point where they're gone, this is due to me. I feel I need it and my deliverables are met. And so I never question it. I'm assuming because the system, it sounds very systematized. It's not really, but because we have now cultivated culture where people
Yeah.
feel comfortable to take those days without necessarily asking for permission, and nobody ever thinks that they're taking it for granted.
Exactly, but we will receive a communication as a courtesy because we want to know where everyone is and that everyone's okay. So again, it's not asking for permission and it's not asking for forgiveness. It's I'm just letting you know that this is happening.
Okay, so now what about there's an assumption that people take leave when there's the ad hoc days, when there's like an emergency or a family crisis, or God forbid, somebody died or something like
Yeah.
that. But what about, and everybody accepts that and we roll with it. What about the idea that we shouldn't just be taking leave for the shitty days?
Yeah.
We should be taking leave for the celebratory ones. I mean, I've just had a graduation. My oldest daughter has just graduated as of yesterday, and this has been the most intense week
Yeah.
of juggling graduation things. I was not prepared for it. It's my first high school
Sure.
graduation, and there were a ton of things going on. I could really have done with a work break. It was very stressful, just mostly because there were so many extra things piled in through
Yeah.
the day, and it would be nice if I had given myself the day off yesterday to say, no work, we're just going to focus on this beautiful celebration that's happening. But I don't
Yeah.
know that celebratory days are given as much credence as the emergency ones.
I mean, I think we just notice the emergency ones a little bit more because they are unexpected, but the celebration days are also taken. We've had people say, well, my friend's getting married on a Friday, which is unusual. So we're taking the long weekend off. There have been times where, I mean, I have 3 children. There are children throughout this team. We're going to watch cricket matches, which are not huge, big events, but those are moments of joy that we would be sad to miss. On a Friday afternoon during the summer, I'm always at water polo games. It's not that we don't celebrate the leave for celebrations. It's just those tend to be a little bit more planned and a little bit more expected, so we don't have to focus on them as much.
That is true. Okay, so now we're sounding like the model children for
My
for
work here is
leave.
done. Yeah.
Okay, no, hold a second. I've got to ask a serious question
Sure.
now, which is how am I, as a leader, modeling what taking leave looks like? And the reason I ask that is because I truly believe that if we're talking about leave as a cultural issue, it really does depend on what are the leaders doing and how they're modeling leave. And I think I'm actually pretty poor modeler because whenever, almost always, when I take leave, I almost always still do some work.
Mm.
And that's my choice. I hate congested inboxes. It makes me feel, I don't
Yeah.
know, terribly chaotic. I will sometimes and occasionally do little bits of admin. I do like to use my holiday times for a bit of thinking. So sometimes people will be getting emails from me while I'm supposed to be on holiday. So actually, now that I'm saying that, I think I'm actually not very good modeler of leave.
I think you're a very good modeler of doing what works for you. And the rest of us feel very comfortable to ignore your emails that you send on holiday because we're not going to act on them until you get back. So that's the first thing. And so the system still works for us. And I think the rest of us find ways to make it work for us as well. Because when I'm on leave, I do tend to check out a little bit more at work. However, on the flip side, my family will also notice that I am checking my emails because I too don't want the congested inbox. So that's so to manage my own anxiety so that when I come back, it is as I need it to be. So again, it's making it work for you. I would be far more anxious on my holiday if I saw 30 emails piling up, as I'm sure you would be.
I mean, isn't that a little bit the fact that we have so much anxiety around these congested
Mm.
inboxes, even when we're on leave? I think that's not a sign of particularly good health, actually. So
Mm.
let's just put a pin in
Is
that. We
that
might need to
damning
take this
evidence?
offline. Yeah,
Damning
yeah, yeah.
evidence.
Okay. We
Yeah.
need to re examine that. And I think this is a real challenge. I mean, the fact is, we can rationalize it and we can make excuses for it, but we may be talking about wanting to be modeling good leave policies and making sure that everybody feels good about taking leave. But if they're also still always
Mm.
on, if they are still actually checking email because the idea of a congested inbox is so revolting, then there is a big problem with that. And that's actually a really good segue into the conversation I want to have around burnout, because burnout is a real thing. We saw it particularly become, it really mushroomed as something companies were paying attention
Mm-hmm.
to during the pandemic because mental health became such a big issue and it didn't go away. Okay. We're just not
Yeah.
talking about it necessarily as much as we were talking about it. And I believe that the leave needed, if someone is actually being diagnosed with burnout, is different to a long weekend. I'm not sure if I read something. The World Health
Mhm.
Organization has actually defined burnout as an occupational syndrome, which has real symptoms
Yeah.
and I think can be classified as an equal to a depression as a
Okay.
clinical diagnosis.
I mean, that's significant. And you're right, companies aren't speaking about it as much anymore. I think a lot of companies thought they were going to solve that with the return to office mandates because the lines became blurred when people were working from home. And that's true to a certain extent because we were working longer hours. It was more difficult to unplug. But I think what has actually happened is the commute's been added back in. The workload hasn't really been reduced. The expectations are as high as they ever were. But this is now just not openly talked about anymore.
The point being that burnout is real, it hasn't gone away, and it is not solved with a long weekend or an extra Friday or a 2 day break.
Sure.
That is not the solution. You actually need an extended
Mm.
break for a burnout diagnosis.
Have you ever witnessed somebody being on the precipice or being burnt out and then managing to come back? What did that solution look like?
So I was actually chatting to somebody yesterday who shared with me a little bit about her burnout experience. She actually ultimately decided to take an extended break, and it took her actually more than a year
Ooh,
to finally,
okay.
yeah, to finally recover and recuperate. So that was extreme, but the truth of it, and she had the luxury of being able to actually take the proper time off to regain her health. First of all, to take time to decompress
Mm-hmm.
from the programming, and then actually recover. I have seen other people stay in this like middling meh sort of just survival state for very, very long time. And they sort of live in a state of just on the precipice of a real
Mm-hmm.
burnout collapse
Right.
because they don't take proper breaks out. And honestly, I've seen people who've had severe burnout. The only solution for that is like a sabbatical type
Yeah.
thing where you take proper 3 months or whatever it is, maybe longer time out.
Well, what a great segue that is into, again, how Jackhammer is getting it right, because we do sabbaticals here, and they're preemptive sabbaticals, because nobody who has taken a sabbatical here has done so because they were burnt out. They wanted to prevent that situation arising.
We have planned this ahead of
Hmm.
time, as one would plan almost like a maternity leave.
Exactly.
And because let's face it, maternity leave is not leave. It's
No, but
let's dispel that.
that's exactly it, and that's the reasoning that I wanted to use. What people don't know is that in the run up to us implementing that as a formal benefit and a perk at Jackhammer, we spoke to a number of clients and HR directors in our networks to talk about how one might bring this about and the considerations. And by and large, the response was, this is going to be impossible. Or, oh, well, if it works out for you, let us know how it works out because this sounds great, but we don't know how it would come about. But the thing that I always came back to was if we can make plans for people to go on medical leave, or we can make a plan for somebody to go on maternity leave and we arrange that kind of cover, why wouldn't we apply that same rationale to a sabbatical? And the assumption is that, well, a sabbatical is by choice. Well, sure, it's by choice, but then we can also choose to plan around it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I must say, I was really proud of that example, and it was preemptive, it was requested, we made it work. It's, yes, okay, let's be honest, it's kind of inconvenient when a key person is out of the workplace.
Yeah.
But the opportunity for making sure that people continue to be happy and healthy in not just their work, but in their whole lives,
Yes.
the advantage of that, it's like a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I think bigger companies are afraid of either people taking advantage of this or, goodness, I don't know, it getting out of hand in some way. Perhaps we can do, or small companies can do things differently to large organizations. But I would challenge
Yeah.
large organizations to think about how they might also offer flexibility and benefits like this, because it's such a win for everybody.
Exactly. I agree that there's a certain amount of agility in a smaller organization, but that doesn't preclude a larger organization from finding some sort of solution that works in their environment.
Okay, I want to talk about AI. AI as it relates to productivity, the enhancement of productivity, and how this may or may not relate to leave or time out. Okay, so I've recently read a UK study that was done on, I think, 40,000 workers that showed that people using AI saved workers 26 minutes per day, which equated to approximately 2 weeks per year, which is
Wow.
kind of significant,
I mean, that's
right?
a whole leave period right there.
I know. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, so with this time saving, is the expectation, and because that's the promise of AI, just at its most fundamental level, is enhanced
Right.
productivity. And so now with this productivity or this time saving that apparently everybody's going to have, are we expected to work more, or do we get the time out? Is it like an incentive? If you use AI and you it makes your work quicker, are you incentivized to have the time that you can then use for yourself? Just a
Oh,
question.
what an existential question, you idealist, you. I mean, of course, you're expected to work more because capitalism always wins.
Oh, you goddamn cynic. Okay. So I think this may be something that organizations are really starting to wrestle with, because what is the incentive for people to become more productive, whether they use AI or any other tool, quite frankly? If their jobs are outcome based and delivery based,
Yeah.
then sure, let's be as quick and efficient as we
Mm,
possibly can. If their jobs are a time based
mm.
and it's about putting your bum on that seat for
All
the
the hours.
required number of
Yeah.
hours, and then the productivity just leads to them having to do more work in the available time, I am just not so sure about that. So I'm going to leave that question up in the air. AI is just too much of a big question in itself and causing me a lot of hassle in my mental hours and my mental health. So, all right, we're running out of time. So I
Okay.
want to talk about our recommendations, because we're clearly the bastion of
Obviously.
great leave policies. Okay, listeners, we're doing this a bit tongue in cheek. We've got our problems too, but we do take leave quite seriously. Okay, let's talk about recommendations for ourselves and others.
Yeah.
What should healthy leave policies look like? Okay, you go.
Look, I think all countries have their statutory minimums when it comes to leave, but all companies could also look at whether that is appropriate for their organization, depending on the intensity of the work and the level of delivery and output that is required. And there is no reason why they shouldn't flex that upwards where appropriate, but also make sure that people are taking their leave. If you're not able to offer them unlimited leave and you don't necessarily want to pay out for leave, make sure that people actually take their leave so that they do come back happier and more productive. So,
Look, I think in some organizations, people are really taking their leave. So there's a range
sure.
around that. My recommendation is around leave mentorship.
Ooh,
I guess this is a note to self, but around managers actually modeling healthy leave behavior, A, taking the
mhm,
leave, B, making sure that people feel good about it, that they're not being bothered while they are away, that they're not being expected to also
mhm,
check in while they're away, that there's proper handover, that they can actually take the proper time out,
yeah.
that their managers aren't sending them emails in the middle of their leave.
Right.
Yes, so as I said, note to self.
Okay. So leave mentorship. I think we should copyright that because that's a that's a
Uh-huh.
good catchphrase. And then, like we do at Jackhammer, celebration and rest are valid reasons to take time off. You do not just need to carve some time out for the emergencies. Celebration time. Prioritize it.
Okay, right. Normalizing celebrations. Okay, and then my last one would be as an encouragement to think about really enabling people to take slightly more extended breaks. You can call them sabbatical, but I'd like to call it extended breaks, and that should be for whatever they need and want. Volunteering time,
Yeah.
personal milestones, walking the Camino, traveling to their once in a lifetime destination,
Yeah.
kind of anything. I think the quid pro quo in terms of love and loyalty,
Hmm.
making that circle of energy in terms of how people feel about their work and about their managers and about their organizations, if you can figure out ways to offer that, it's just, there are no downsides as far as I'm concerned.
Even if we're saying circle of energy, yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's it. We're almost at time. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of On Work and Revolution. So just remember, This was about your permission slip to take the effing break. And whether it's a day, whether it's a week, a real sabbatical, lots of encouragement. Actually, I'm just about to go on a week's break tomorrow. And I am now going to try to stay mostly offline. So yeah, let's see if I can do some good modeling around that. Thank you so much, Advaita, for joining me today. As always, so much fun.
Always.
Bye now.
Thanks for hanging around all the way to the end. It would mean the world if you would rate and review on Work and Revolution on your favorite listening app. It helps people know that the show is worth listening to, and so I'll really appreciate that. Thank you so much.